quick recap, my pool booster pump is making a funny noise. That's what it sounds like. So I changed out the capacitor. It didn't help. I checked all the connections on the wiring inside this box here. No help. So I've determined, since the pump is 16 years old and I've rebuilt it 3 times, that it needs to be replaced. So in this episode we're going to change that booster pump out. We're going to start with turning off the power. So in order for us to change this pump, we have to obviously remove it from the system. We need to remove the impeller internally in here, so we have to take this whole piece off as one with the pump in order to get the shaft out, the shaft seal and the impeller off. 1/2 inch bolt nuts, 9/16 bolts. Definitely break these free before you try to remove the pump from the system, because these bolts here will help solidify the pump so you can actually get these loose. I've taken these out several times. They will get corroded. They can be really difficult to get out. If you're going to end up changing the bearings inside here, you don't want to put some type of anti-seize on these before you reinstall them. We have to remove the electrical connections off the back here. There's 3. I'm not sure how much you want me to bore you by taking all this stuff apart. The heads of the bolts are captured inside this hexagonal thing in here, which make it so it won't spin when you tighten the nut. You can also put the head of the bolt on this side and tighten it up, but I recommend this way. Don't forget to open up your air valve to let the water get out of the system. That way you won't have a flood. I've already loosened these ones up with the 9/16. And we'll take that all the way off when we have it on the workbench to get the impeller off. You gotta take the ground wire off. Normally you would just turn it loose here, but it's a big wire. So I'm sure you're gonna realize that this is actually in a different spot. Evidently I hit stop instead of record when I was taking all the wiring off this outside. So I went out and I bought one of these so I could show you how this one on my pool pump comes apart. This one in particular doesn't have the separation like this one does. See how this one comes apart? This is what mine does outside, and you'll take this nut off and then slide it up the conduit. The wire relief in the one that I have would slide as well, and then you would pull the conduit off the end here. So this stuff would be sitting aside and the wire would be coming out of this, right? With this style, in order to get this off, you have to pull the wire, which we're going to do anyways because we're changing the pump, right? So to start with, we take the cover off. Again, you don't have to loosen these 2 up because it'll slide over and come right up. Now the ground wire is held in up top up here with just a screw. When I put the one back together on my pool, I'm actually going to have a terminal in with a hole in it to go through that. It makes a better connection, all right? Now, when I took mine apart outside, the insulation on the wiring was actually coming off. So I don't know if it was arcing out against something else, and that's why the pump wouldn't run. That's something I didn't look into very well before I bought the new pump. But again, this is 18 years old. I've changed the bearings inside 3 different times because they would squeal. So I've had it apart quite a bit. So once you pull your wires out, the terminal ends are typically going to be this flag type. If they're not the flag type, they're straight push-ons, and they're not going to go through the conduit. So you have to cut these off either way. So just take your dikes or your cutters and just cut the wires off, And you're going to pull those, so the conduit's sitting here, right? So you're going to pull the wire out just enough to get it out, right? So the wire and conduit out of the way, and then you're going to just unscrew this guy. If you choose not to unscrew this, you want to leave the wires on there for some reason, or you don't want to pull the wires out because you don't want to cut the ends off, you have to spin the entire pump. Now, I didn't show the disconnection of the pump yet either. So this piece, now it's out of the way, the wire is out of the way. It's down to taking the housing off that goes to the impeller, and then the impeller spins off, just like any other impeller, just comes right off. So the 4 bolts, don't forget to loosen those before you take all this other stuff apart, just so you don't have to do it on the bench because it can be a pain in the butt. The pump will come loose, get it up out of the way, and we can stick in our new pump. And in this case, I was able to actually use the wire that was still in the house, and it was enough. I had brought that much extra, so I brought it down to where the wire wasn't damaged, cut it off, and crimped on new flag connectors on there and put it back together. And I'm pretty sure it's in the rest of the video. You can watch that. This is the only section that I screwed up and didn't video because I hit stop. So that's how I take that apart. And obviously, to put it back together would be exactly the opposite. You'd install the pump onto the impeller on the pump, and then put the housing onto the pool equipment. So now it's sitting in the mount. You put your this piece on, you thread it back in, run your wires through, crimp your new terminal ends, and you're off to go. So I have a video on crimping if you want to check that out. I'd appreciate it. Like and subscribe, like everybody else asked you to. So at this point, this should lift right off. Again, that's your shaft seal. Got the rubber O-ring on it. Here's my new pump. You want to check when you get them and make sure that your shaft threads, these guys here, aren't damaged. Mine came sticking out of the box, so I'm about to check that, see if they're damaged or not. So I do have to put an O-ring on the pump, this guy here. As you can see, the new pump doesn't come with one. Now, it's always a good idea to go to your local Harbor Freight or order online just a standard O-ring kit. They have metric and they have standard SAE. I recommend having both in the house. There's an assortment of stuff, and if you can't find what you want, I have found that Ace Hardware has a great stock of O-rings of different sizes and stuff. You just take the O-ring in there with you and they'll help you match it up. It's real simple. So we're going to take this one off and match it up with one of these to put on this guy. Now, if you buy a seal kit to replace all this stuff, your O-ring on the impeller pump housing and a new pressure seal here, this guy here, it should come with a new O-ring for the shaft. This is a 1/2 inch here. This is slightly smaller, so it is a metric O-ring. In this case, it is a 11.8 inner diameter and a 16.6 OD. They are actually the same selection in this little box I have. Number 112. You can go to the top of the box, it'll tell you the actual size of it. So I'm going to put the metric one on. So when we took the pump off, the capacitor goes on top. That's to prevent I assume to prevent water from just running down the side and getting inside here and messing with the wiring. It also has vent holes down here, and they obviously go on the bottom. So you want to make sure when you put everything back together that you orientate it to where that is going to be the top. But this has a weep hole in the bottom here to let water drain out. So put this in so it's sideways so you can look and see if the shaft is actually turning. Just like so. That's the way they had it on when they installed it originally. Don't forget, this goes on the bottom. This guy mounts on top. Remember, all you want to do is snug these up, then you'll finish tightening them once it's installed. That'll give you the extra support you need to make sure they're good and tight. So again, see-through holes here, weep hole on the bottom. There's not one on the other side. Floor mount on the outside of the adapter housing for the impeller housing. Next is to put the impeller on. take our impeller. Just a word of advice, if you do end up changing this out, don't touch the surface area. I have a friend who does a lot of pool equipment, and he says that actually just the oils on your finger touching this can cause it to leak. So on the old pump, we had this little cap on it that we could take off, and it was threaded on, which obviously I broke, so it just sat on there. The new one has this metal cap. Just a small little screwdriver I used to pop it loose and pull it out so we can get our 1/2 inch on that shaft to hold it still so we can tighten the impeller. Doesn't have to be super tight, but it needs to be snug. Now the next spot is to put it in position, so if we end up having to replace all the wiring, we can actually still turn our pool on and run our pool, even though the pool cleaner pump is attached and not working. So I've set all the bolts inside here. I'm going to line the cleaner up a little bit, and I'm going to stick a couple bolts through, and I'm going to start some nuts here. Now on a project like this, with most you guys know with anything, you want to start every bolt before you smoke one down. Otherwise you won't be able to get the last one in. Easy to snug up. Remember, just a 1/2 inch. Make sure your bolt heads are captured inside the hexagon there. And just walk around and tighten them up. Now that they're all snug, I'm going to tighten them up a little bit. I'm not going to put a lot of oomph on them. I'm going to guess probably about, I don't know, 5 foot-pounds, 50 inch-pounds, somewhere around there. You don't need to smoke them down like there's no tomorrow. The last thing you want to do is crack the housing, especially as old as my pool is. Now that we got those tight, we're going to tighten the 9/16 ones. The impeller adapter. Alright, next thing to do is to the wiring. Just like the other one, this cover plate comes off, in this case, with 2 Phillips heads. Just like the old pump, this has the 2 quick release things. Just slides in the bottom here and then rocks over. This does not have a seal on it, so you may want to put some silicone on it. I'm probably going to try and use this old crappy seal from the other one. It'll probably work just fine. Same size. So off to the wiring. Thread on your 90 degree. In this case, it's not going to be super tight, but it'll be tight enough to keep all the critters out. Alright, I got to fix the wiring. I'll be back. Now since I'm replacing my terminal ends, I cut them off. Once you get your wires through, you can put your sleeve back on, conduit sleeve, slide up the lock, tighten the bolt down. So I put terminal ends on here. Standard homeowner, I just have the insulated ones. I don't have the uninsulated, so it should work. And then I've actually put a ring on this guy. So when I put it together, it'll hold the wire rather than just be wrapped around. Now once I get it started, I'll tuck the wire back into the housing conduit so I don't have stuff hanging out like it is right now. I like the clean look. When you tighten them up, I like to move, unless you have a washer on them, and I don't have a washer on them, so I gotta try and twist. Again, they don't have to be super duper tight, they do have to be snug. So now we're gonna turn power on. We're gonna close the vent valve on the filter and start the main pump up, and then we'll start the booster pump, and hopefully it won't leak. So here's the big test. We're about to turn it on. Beautiful. And that's how you change the booster pump. The main pump will be the same way, heavier. If you want to see a video on how to use crimps and the right way to crimp, check out my other stuff. That's it.